everybody right there on the field. We're now joined by Ryan Abraham. Inside Troy covers USC, the Pac-12 game with Utah, a rematch of their only loss, and Caleb Williams red hot when it comes to the Heisman Trophy discussion. Ryan, thank you. It's been a while. Appreciate your time. Have they exceeded the expectations in Lincoln Riley's first year?
I can't see how you couldn't think that. I mean, when you take over a 4-8 football team and one of the worst defenses we've seen in USC history, to turn it around that quickly, not just with the roster, but the culture on the team. And, of course, it took some special players, like you mentioned, Caleb Williams, but they did a lot of work, through spring and the summer, and just to kind of get themselves and put themselves in the position. And to be in every game like they were, to be able to win 11 of the 12, and the only game you lost was by 1 point on the road in a crazy emotional day. I mean, it's been pretty amazing. And the fact that, they're knocking on the door of winning a Pac-12 championship in the first year, making a college football playoff in the first year, and winning a Heisman Trophy potentially in the first year. I mean, that's beyond any expectations I had for Lincoln Riley in year one.
Ryan, Caleb Williams came into the year one of the favorites for the Heisman Trophy because of how he ended last year. And then it kind of felt like he was, not on the total outside looking in, but he was kind of like drifting along. But then their schedule ratcheted up, and he's played great in every single one of those games. Is there a feeling in L.A. like it's his to lose right now?
That's the feeling. We've seen, Heisman trophies, around here before, and it's funny, like the even years when USC gets to play Notre Dame at home in the season finale, those tend to be, special moments for players if you have a good USC player. When Carson Palmer won the Heisman in 2002, he had a really great game against Notre Dame. Same thing with, Matt Leinart and, 2004. And then this year, Caleb Williams, it wasn't his, best passing game of the season, but man, getting 3 rushing touchdowns and evading the rush the way he was. It's always going to be this national stage. It's a traditional rivalry that people know about all over, across the country in college football. So if you have a USC quarterback or player that can have a big game against Notre Dame, sort of kind of sets you apart. And I think that was something that happened there. Certainly C.J. Stroud losing to Michigan, I think that was helping his cause. But just knowing, I think the track record of Lincoln Riley helps, and just knowing that, how special of a player Caleb Williams can be and get to see it on the field. I think he kind of separated himself a little bit this weekend.
Just kind of staying on that note there, Ryan. I mean, you knew when they got Lincoln Riley, that was a big deal. And you knew when they got Caleb Williams, that was as big of a deal. And I'm sure you watched him, whether, once they got him or prior when he was, doing his thing at Oklahoma. But seeing that Caleb Williams experience up close and personal week by week this year, what's that been like for you?
It's one of those things where you get really impressed with young men that can handle themselves well. It's not always easy, or you're thrust into the spotlight. And his first interview when he came to USC was Good Morning America, which was like, okay. And he never really spoke to the media under Lincoln Riley because he was a freshman until they went. They played in the Alamo Bowl last year after Riley had left. So we didn't really know much about Caleb Williams outside of stuff you would hear from going to the Elite 11s and maybe seeing him play there. But he's just been really impressive. And I think the way he won over his teammates right away, and they just wanted him to be, an instant leader for these guys, and they've just followed him. And the way he's handled himself, I think he's got a lot of confidence, the way he plays football. And, I love that he can win games in different ways. One game he's throwing for, 370 yards, in another game he runs for a few touchdowns, or whatever he needs to do. He seems to be able to figure it out. But he's just been an impressive young man to see what he's able to do. And I think a lot of people that don't follow, they're like, okay, well, he's going to the NFL, right? Like, no, he's a sophomore. He has to stay for one more year. So you get at least one more year of that at USC. So it's been pretty special to watch him. We've seen a lot of really good players come through here, and the fact that he just kind of transferred in and made his mark on the program as quickly as he did is really a testament to his ability and character.
All right, so there's other games that would affect those who might be in New York, whether it's TCU and Max Duggan or if it's C.J. Stroud. He's not playing this weekend. His regular season is done, and there might be one or two others. In your opinion, does Caleb Williams and USC have to win for him to win the Heisman Trophy?
I think he's got such a big lead right now. As long as he doesn't lay an egg and, throw a bunch of interceptions. I mean, one of the crazy things, he's accounted for 44 touchdowns this season and only has 3 turnovers. Like, as much as he runs around, he's never fumbled the ball. He's got 3 interceptions, spread out throughout the season, and that's it. And this has just been a team that's taking care of the ball. I think a lot of it has to do with him. And as much as he runs around, not just to run and take off and pick up first downs, but just to run to evade the rush, never having turned the ball over, it's been special. So I think like a Max Duggan, he's got an opportunity this weekend for sure, but I think Caleb Williams got a pretty big lead. If they lose that game like they lost to Utah before where he had a huge game, I don't think it's going to impact that much. And who knows? I mean, there's a lot of Heisman voters. I'm one of them. I'm one of those voters, but I think he's got a pretty big lead now that as long as it's not some terrible like 4 interception game or something, I still think he's got a really good shot. If they win the game, I think it's it's locked up, but if he has a decent game, I still think he can win it, even if USC loses.
Ryan, how does this year affect how Lincoln Riley will build the roster? Obviously, everybody has to use portal and scholarship, and regular high school recruiting, in whatever fashion they need. But this team built obviously a lot through the portal. But now I can't imagine that he's not going to be able to easily recruit even more rapidly after just 1 year.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is the year ago today is when they announced him. He had the press conference and everything and, became USC's head coach. As you know, the early signing period is just a few weeks away. So they kind of, tweaked the signing class they had a little bit and, add a couple of players, but they didn't really have a lot of time to hit the high school ranks as much. So I think that's why they did so much in the portal. Now he's had a full year to do a lot of the high school recruiting. And I think the majority of this class is going to come from high school, but they still will try to fill some holes in the transfer portal. It might be a case where a player leaves that wasn't getting a lot of playing time, and they try to replace him with somebody from the portal. You're already starting to see on Twitter, I mean, it's just crazy. Like, portal season is coming, right? It's here, and you're just seeing all these things happen. So I don't expect them to hit the portal quite as hard. Before last year, they were selling a lot of hope, and now they can actually sell results and show what they're doing on the field. And if you're a wide receiver or running back, you're like, oh, I want to come play with Caleb Williams, and all that kind of stuff. So I think they can sell that, but I think he really wants to focus as much on the high school ranks as possible, get a bigger class like they did last year, and then kind of fill that in with guys from the portal. That'll probably be the plan going forward, unless you get some big losses at one position, then you might have to hit it harder. But in general, I think he wants to build it from high school more than the portal.
I remember hearing after the season kind of got underway a bit, a few weeks into it, and USC was having some success that, at some point or another, their defense is not going to be able to keep creating turnovers at the pace that they were, and they're just not going to be able to rely on the defense getting turnovers. I mean, at some point, are they going to not be able to rely on that? Because it seems like it's still happening for this defense.
Yeah, it's like that's the plan. We talked to Alex Grinch this morning at practice, and he would coming up with different stats. It's like, you do studies, and if we get 24 takeaways, that equates to 9 wins for the team, no matter what the offense does. And that's just something that they work on all the time, is forcing turnovers and putting yourself in the right position. And they can be really aggressive in spots. And they've given up some huge plays, chunk plays, quarterbacks that weren't that good, look like Heisman Trophy winners. It's been some weird stuff. They had Dalton Kincaid, the Utah tight end, caught 16 passes on 16 targets, like 234 yards, like crazy stuff. But then they've also done some really good things, like forcing these turnovers and stuff. So it's kind of it's a little bit of a mixed bag. But when you're trying to get turnovers and you continue to get turnovers, then you have to assume that they're doing something right. They're doing something along what they want. And I think they're willing to sacrifice giving up some drives if like every third drive is going to end in a turnover, which they get to do sometimes. You're going to win a bunch of games that way. So, can you rely on it all the time? I don't know, but they've been really consistent about forcing those turnovers, and it seems to complement what the offense is doing well, where the offense can get out early, get a lead, and it sort of puts pressure on opposing offenses to do something maybe out of their comfort zone. Like Notre Dame was a great rushing team. USC held them to 90 yards rushing, but Drew Pine threw for a whole lot of yards, completed 15 of his first 15 passes. So maybe you don't want to give that up, but you did take away what Notre Dame does well, and you make them kind of go out of their comfort zone. So I think a lot of that is just by design, and that's how you force some of those turnovers. You're kind of making opponents uncomfortable, even though you're giving up maybe, they're doing something they normally don't do, like throwing the ball over the yard. But if you're not letting them run, then I think it changes what they want to do, and then you get some mistakes. And Notre Dame had 2 turnovers in that game, and it ended up being a pretty big difference in it.
Ryan, this is a team that is Utah, USC. It was an incredible game. The first game, they went for 2 to win it. I mean, is this the perfect game because it wipes out, if they win, the one loss?
Yeah, to me, people were asking. I was like, I thought it'd be better to play in Oregon in the championship game. That's until Oregon lost to the Civil War to Oregon State. But that's the primary recruiting adversary that USC has. Like, that's a team that can come into Southern California and take 4- and 5-star players away from the Trojans. And it's going to be harder to do that now with Lincoln Riley there. But they've been the biggest recruiting adversary, and they played them in 2020 in the championship game, and Oregon came into the Coliseum and ended up winning that one. But I think when talking to a lot of players, they're not admitting it, but I think they want revenge. I think they want an opportunity to right the wrong. It was a really weird game. It was very emotional. It was in Salt Lake City. Like I mentioned, Dalton Kincaid had his career game. Cam Rising, the quarterback, probably had his career game. They were honoring their fallen teammates that died from tragic gun violence. It was a really, a lot of things had to go wrong for USC to lose that game. There was weird officiating calls. They took away an interception because of the phantom, like roughing the passer. There was a lot of weird stuff in that game. And I think a lot of players really wanted to get another opportunity to play Utah. Now it'll be in a neutral field. USC's healthier, I think, than they were coming out of Utah game. Utah probably not as much. I think the advantage has sort of shifted more to USC's side on this one. So I think this is the game they wanted. Even though I think it would have been better to play Oregon like more of a national scale, but for this team, it seems like for them, they want to play Utah again and kind of right that wrong. So I think you're right about that one. That's what these guys want.
Ryan, one more thing. I saw I think Dinich at ESPN had an article about that the Rose Bowl is going to take this negotiation table timeline down to like Wednesday. There's a deadline for them to blank or get off the pot. Are they that arrogant to think they can win this battle with the college football playoff?
I mean, I hope not. I think the Rose Bowl is special. I love going there and checking these out, but man, college football is changing, and I think you have to change with the times. I think the Rose Bowl can be a big part of the playoff, and I think when the Alabamas of the world or anyone comes west and gets to play in the Rose Bowl. I was there for the Florida State, Auburn national championship game. Like there can be some really special games there, but if you're just holding on to like it has to be this, Big Ten, Pac-10, I just don't think that's going to be the way to go. But they're going to go down. It's going to be kicking and screaming. But at the end of the day, I think the Rose Bowl can, they could potentially get left behind, which would be a shame, I think, for the sport. So I think they're going to eventually come around, but it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a tough fight, I think, all the way through.
Well, $450 million in extra revenue, I think would make that decision a lot easier for everybody. And it'd make it really easy if they cost everybody that, then I don't think they're back at the table.
Yeah, those dollar figures are staggering. And the way the Pac-12 is changing now with USC and UCLA leaving, I mean, that's like 45% of all the Rose Bowls are going now to the Big Ten. Like, it's not going to be, with the conferences changing, it's not going to be the traditional game that it was anyway. So I think just, be part of the playoff, it could be a permanent part of the playoff, and I think that would be great. The tradition of Big Ten, and Pac-12 or Pac-10 or whatever, it's just not going to be the same anymore with USC and UCLA leaving. I mean, USC's won more Rose Bowls than any other team has gone to. So it's just, you can't take that away from the Pac-12 and expect it to be, Washington, Oregon. Like, they've made some, but it's just nowhere near the amount of Rose Bowl games that USC and UCLA went to. So they got to change. I just hope they can come around to it. And like you said, they got a lot of reasons to want to consider changing all that, $450 million.
Has there been any fan blowback on road games for USC or UCLA? And I know you're USC all the time. As far as the Big Ten, or they win a game and they start chanting Big Ten, has there been any of that? Because we saw that a little bit on occasion with the Big 12 and A&M. Haven't really heard that with Texas and Oklahoma this year. Has there been any of that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the one thing, like the road games people will bring up. There'd be a lot of road trips, especially for the, Olympic sports. But I think on the USC side, it's been mostly positive. I think just once USC hired Lincoln Riley and they realized, okay, the program's taking this seriously again, and they want to try to win. They realize it's going to be a lot easier to win in the Big Ten, where you have more resources and everything, than the Pac-12, where you're kind of going to be an also-ran all the time. It's probably a little different on the UCLA side. There's more fan blowback and alumni blowback, and that's why you get this Board of Regents meeting coming up, where I think a lot of that's just pandering, but posturing. But I think you will see UCLA and USC go. The USC side, they're not complaining about it as much. There's some fans complaining, but there's more of it on the UCLA side. But I think at the end of the day, UCLA's athletic department was struggling. You need that infusion of cash, and you just can't turn down that kind of money, So the kind of coaches that are coming in the Big Ten now, the SEC and the Big Ten, and then Lincoln Riley being in there and Chip Kelly, I think it's going to be really cool to kind of see these super conferences come together, because the money's going up, the coaching salaries are going up, and they're getting really good coaches to come in there. So it's both SEC and Big Ten. So I think it's going to make both those conferences better. I think it's going to make it harder for some of those other conferences to compete with all those resources and all that coaching talent going into those two conferences.
Ryan, thank you. Appreciate your time. Ryan Abraham, Inside Troy, covers USC, and we got to know Ryan back during the summer.